We can. All right, this is Dr. Z and Ms. Petit. We're here at Boyd Anderson High School, and Ms. Petit teaches language arts. So last week, I came in to observe you, and here is the seating chart where you had the 6 different groups. And then what I was tracking was your movement around to the classroom. You had given specific instruction and at that time your standard and your board configuration was perfect. You've been really keeping up on that. And I love the fact that on your agenda you're giving the specific time frames, because that really helps to chunk the lesson for the students. Your standard was to analyze a complex set of ideas or sequence of events and explain how specific individual ideas and events interact and develop. And so the one thing that I wanted to mention was you, for some reason, the majority of the time, and I was tracking like every 5 minutes, you spent in the back on that particular group. Was there a reason for that?
Yes, because a lot of times those students, they need you to remind them, get back on task, get back on task. So I do sometimes walk around there like a lot, yes.
Yeah. Now, were these students that were grouped in here, were those all, well, tell me, was there a logic behind where you picked the groups? How did you pick the groups? Because I noticed that in this particular table, you had the 2 ESOL students, the young man who apparently does not have that much command, and then the girl who did have better command of the English. So is there a strategy that you used in grouping the students?
Yes, because before I tried to group some of the ELL students with other students, but then I found that the other students were not very conducive to and then actually what happened with the ELL student is because he came from another class where the students were more conducive. So what happened is that he shut down. And so I was like, okay, so if he sits next to another ELL student, he feels more comfortable to do stuff. And then of course I go and explain things to them as well.
Okay, so tell me about this particular group. Why are they all together? If that's the group that apparently tends to get off task, because I know that the one girl sitting right there was quite vocal.
She's also the one in that group, she's actually the one that's the highest level.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she's the one that's the highest level, and so sometimes when the other ones are confused, she's the one that better also helps explain what's going on as well. In that group, it's just they were coming off of I don't know, a football game, and so they're it's a football player that's in this group, and then she's on the cheerleading team, and so they were talking about the game. Yes,
okay.
So that's why they kept on going off task, and I had to be
going back on to your literally, because
so what about the time? Yes.
Yeah, you were on top of them. So let me ask you, because I noticed that some of the questions kept asking about the directions. Did they have the directions on the paper? Because at the time, I didn't see them on the board. So how did they know what to do? Because they kept asking you, what are we doing here again? And so I wondered, where were the directions? How did they know what to do?
Because it's an assignment that they were continuing. We had started it briefly at the end of the last class, and so then they were actually having time to complete it, because when we started it at the end of last class, they had finished another assignment, and then we had started this task, right? And they were supposed to read the paragraphs, read the essay, and then answer the questions, Cornell notes, which is what we do with most of the text that we read. First we do Cornell notes on it, and then afterwards we do another kind of activity, just so that they have a balance.
Okay, and was anybody absent from the group? Because they just kept...
Yes.
Okay, that's the question.
So so she was absent from before, he was absent from before, and she was absent. So 3 of them were absent.
Okay, so then so that's an idea that even though you may not have the directions written on the specific assignment, put them up somewhere, because what happens for those students who weren't there the day before, they may not know.
Okay.
So, and then the other thing that kept coming up that I noticed was, even though you have the time frames, one of the things that I may suggest is that maybe you could put up, and I don't know if you have an Elmo or something that would project time, but a timer to say, or maybe just even put start time and end time on the board, so that the students are clear, because you kept saying, all right, you know, you
Yes,
got
to like remind them.
to
Yeah.
remind them to stay on task because they know that they have a specific, because if we don't give them the time frames, then I'm not coming out. If we don't give them the time frames, then they tend to take longer
Yes.
than need be. Okay, but as far as your movement, you were moving, although you stayed there, and that makes sense now that they were off task due to the fact that they didn't know what the assignment was, and that they were more vocal about their social than they were. Tell me about this area. There was only one young lady over here. Why was she separated?
It's just like I think that on the day that you came, there were like several students. My fifth period, what happens is that a lot of them either come late to fifth period because it's the first class of the day, or like that's the class where I have most absenteeism. My fifth period, yes. And then that's the class that's usually like whenever there's testing and all this stuff, they're always out. So my fifth period class is always behind my other classes.
And they're the first period of the like orange or black day,
Yes.
whatever it is. Okay.
So like, and yeah, and I always concerned about that just because like, since, I mean, obviously testing is best to do like in the morning and stuff, but what usually happens is that they're behind like all my other classes just because they're always pulled for other
things.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just wondering if that's the case in that particular class, I would suggest that, because I had something similar. Always my first period was the last, they would show up late. I think it's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
In that case, what I would do is, instead of normally my regular classes, if like every Friday, whatever the test day was, I gave the test and then I gave notes. With that particular class, I gave notes first to let them all, the stragglers, come in, and then I assessed. So that might be another thing to consider for that particular class, which kind of just flips things around a little bit, but...
Because I try to just to like make like so between 7:40 and 8 or something, like not heavy lifting is done, right? And then after 8 then start, because I know I spoke to like several of them just about like, come on, and so they've been doing better and like coming to school like on time, because they're like, oh, like you really do work, like, and I was like, yep.
Yeah.
You know, whatever, just to make sure that they're on task. So like some of them now, they come like regularly, like on time, and I do try to change it a little. It's just that I was trying to get them to like catch up,
right?
Yeah.
And that's the one thing, that if there's an accountability component, which would be like grading everything, then they're more apt to show up because they're like, oh, it's affecting my academic grade. So that's something also to keep in mind. With all the classes, because even a lot of times I also had difficulty at the end of the day, or after lunch, because after lunch they want to stay talking to their friends. So that's why I always gave a quiz at the beginning of the class, so that way they would get to the class. Okay, so those were the recommendations that I had, was just to put the timer on, possibly at least identify the beginning time and the start time.
I'm trying to see if there's like a thing that I could.
Yeah, I know that there's different apps, and I know like Mr. Pace uses one, and to keep the kids going, they can see the seconds going off. And then again, the directions was the second thing.
Yeah, because my thing is, because I want to project the time, and before I was like with my laptop, and then having the timer that Bowen showed me. However, then my laptop is over there. Yeah, and so I'm just like, oh, I need to find that balance, or maybe something, I don't know, that sticks to the board or something.
Yeah, because even your clock is here in the middle, so that's not too bad. And I could probably get you another clock that we can hang up, just a cheap one, so that they can keep track of time, even though they all have their cell phones. But something where they're staying abreast of it, because they were like, how much longer do we have? I mean, I think like 3 students asked that throughout.
Because they want to make sure they
But it went well. I mean, you were keeping them on task. You definitely were moving around. I was going to say, if you put a pedometer on you, this explains why you're very skinny.
Oh,
you're constantly
they're
walking.
Always saying that. They're like, Miss, like you're always there. So I was like, yes,
you're right there, and you were. A couple of times you scared a couple of the kids, but that's good. That you're on top of them instead of sitting down at your desk.
Why don't you sit?
But you're, and that way they also feel comfortable and confident that if they had a question, that you're immediately there to respond to it. So. All right, I think we're 9.5 minutes.
Bye.